All right. So this wonderful session has been actually put together by the student group coming out of the undergrad BSW program. So we're very excited about that. We'll let them introduce themselves in just a second, but I wanted to welcome everyone. I am Judith Susan Rocha, currently the interim MSW program director, and very, very excited and happy to hear from our speaker today. So I will pass the baton over to my wonderful colleague, Shannon Wall, which will share a little bit about herself, but she'll also give us a little more information about the presentation and the speaker that we have today.
Thank you, Dr. Rocha. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Instructor Shannon Wall. I'm an instructor at Northeastern Illinois University, and I'm just happy to be here to present our wonderful, wonderful speaker today. Our speaker today is Mr. Timothy May. Timothy is currently serving as the Assistant Director for the Black Student Success at Northeastern Illinois University. Formerly, he was a teacher at Antioch High School in Antioch, California. He received his master's in higher education from Loyola University in Chicago in 2016, and he continues to dig deeper into his research around exoticism and disposability and the healing of Black bodies. Timothy received recently his first poetry and affirmation book entitled "And Still I Rise to Fantasize," which attempts to channel Black resilience in the face of consistent trauma while having the unwavering courage to strive towards being holistically well. Timothy has devoted himself to making sure that people from low-income communities are prepared for and comfortable with the possibility of advocating for themselves to ensure that a true sense of community is accomplished. Thank you. I want everyone to put their hands together for our speaker today, Mr. Timothy Mays.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for having me as well. It's truly a pleasure to be here and be with you all talking about something that I'm very passionate about in community activism work and talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. Also wanted to thank you, Shannon, for introducing me. I see you have a Sigma Gamma Rho shirt. I'm a part of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, so D9 love to you. Yeah, definitely. I'm excited to be here. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to jump into it. Can you all hear me fairly well? Is the volume okay? Great. Let me share my screen. Let me share. Okay. All right. So again, today, I'll be, going through the Black Lives Matter movement, the inception of it. I'll kind of give a brief overview and discuss with you all the timeline for things that we're going to discuss today. If, at any point in time through the presentation, I operate from a classroom leadership model. So I'm used to, students and folks in the space being able to just stop me and, make points or ask questions. So if you feel compelled to ask me a question at any point, I don't mind stopping. I won't feel that it's intrusive or invasive or disruptive in any way. But I want to make sure that we really do. I do answer all your questions and that we achieve a sense of community in what we're building today. So, all right. So just a little brief. The bio is always great. It always strikes me. As far as being able to hear the things that I've accomplished and the works that I do. I think when you do it every day, you kind of get entrenched in it and you don't really realize all of the things you've done and are doing. So it's a pleasure to have that being stated. Currently, I work at Northeastern Illinois University. I serve as the Assistant Director for Black Student Success, and I also serve as the Chair of the Black Student Success Committee. I've also in the past, I've been I consider myself a social justice educator. I taught at the K through 12 level for many years at the high school that I actually graduated from in the San Francisco Bay Area. And, I tell people I operate from a Black queer feminist lens. And I say that just to give you context about how I present, and particularly that's the framework in which the people who I'm trying to keep at the center of everything that I do, because I feel that when we advocate for the most marginalized in our society, that love and that expression of what resources and things that we do to care for those folks permeates out into the world. And so also I wanted to mention just in transparency, I identify also as a recovering homophobe. And so why do I mention that? Particularly in saying that, it's to remind all of us that we all have the ability to change, right? With the things that we learn. I know people would like to say, "Oh, I'm not a racist," or I'm not. I've taken anti-racist training, right? And so we like to not have those labels and stigmas put next to our names. But I'm somebody who has for the last 10 years or so have been actively working on myself and doing the work to be a true social justice educator. And so that's why I say I'm recovering, because there are instances with my biases and things like that that I might not be aware of, and I'm not perfect. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay. All right, so we'll get into it. So what we're going to do, I just gave my brief intro. I'm going to give you context, particularly about the Black Lives Matter movement, and some additional history attached to their context. And then in addition to that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the evidence related to the Black Lives Matters movement, in which gives a validity. And then we'll also talk about next steps and ways that you can get involved, and answer any questions that you may have. So I'm not someone who likes to read long paragraphs, so I'll just mention briefly what this statement is saying. It's mentioning that the Black Lives Matter movement was started after the murder of Trayvon Martin in 2013. Their approach and what they really wanted to do was eradicate white supremacy and build local power, and thinking about the violence in which the Black community has faced. And so the idea, it's really an ideology. Black Lives Matter movement is really an ideology. It's not exclusive to one specific person or a specific group in a specific area, but it's really an ideology and a thought process really that is built around the Black imagination, innovation, centering Black joy, and really rethinking the way that we see the world to better support Black lives. So a little bit about the guiding values and principles. Again, I mentioned this ideology and political intervention. In a world that basically looks at Black people as if they are less valuable, and so some of the core values of it you can see here on the right hand side: restorative justice, diversity, globalism, collective value, empathy, right? Queer affirming, Black families, right? These are all things that are super integral to the work that is being done by everybody who is a part of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think it's important to mention that the movement is set to be intergenerational in the way that it works, right? Acknowledging those in the past who have contributed and sacrificed their lives for the work to continue the forward movement of Black people being treated equitably in this country. And so always wanted to acknowledge our ancestors who came before us and who have gave us the ability to forward the work that we do now. All right. So just to give a little context, more context, the Black Lives Matter movement was started and founded by three women: Patrice Cullors, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi in July of 2013. Again, after the death or the murdering of Trayvon Martin. I like to make it very clear that it was the murdering of Trayvon Martin. He didn't just die. Also, it was created as an online community, right? Really to combat anti-Blackness and anti-Black racism, and particularly looking at police brutality. Over the past 6 or 7 years, the Black Lives Matter movement has expanded to over 30 chapters within the US. And so there are various versions and divisions of the movement You'll also see where some folks get a little bit confused. There's a Black Lives Matter movement, and then there's the movement for Black Lives, right? Which is a totally, I want to say different organization, but they have some of the same ideologies and beliefs, just more on the political moving aspect of it. Right. So I want to just play this clip. This is from a young lady, Kennedy Cook, a Black identified teen, young woman who really explains the context of how the Black Lives Matter movement was started. And I think it's important to hear her context because when she did this TED Talk, she was around the age that Trayvon Martin was, right? And so a lot of what the excitement and energy around the Black Lives Matter movement is for a lot of people. They could identify with the movement and see themselves as potentially, Trayvon Martin and some of the other folks who were murdered by police brutality and white supremacy in this country. So I'll play just 2 minutes of this clip just to give you a better context and understanding.
Hashtag Black Lives Matter. This is a consistent trend we often see on the news and especially social media. But do we honestly understand what it means or why we even say it? I mean, some of us only say it when an unarmed black man is shot and killed by the police. And another part of us has substituted Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter because we just don't understand the reason behind it. But that's why I'm here today, to explain to you the reasonings behind this movement and why we say Black Lives Matter. It all began in February 2012 when George Zimmerman, the captain of his neighborhood watch party, reported a suspicious person in his neighborhood. He is then instructed to remain in his vehicle and to wait until police arrive. But instead, Zimmerman disregards these instructions and begins to follow 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. Moments later, neighbors report hearing a gunshot. The sound of that gunshot is what killed 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. In 2013, Zimmerman was acquitted in the murdering of Trayvon Martin because it was in self-defense. Regardless, we watched a man get away with murdering a child. And Trayvon isn't the only person who has a story like this. In 2014, Tamir Rice was shot and killed by the police for playing with a BB gun. He was only 12 years old. And just like Trayvon and just like Tamir, I am an African-American teenager. That could have been me, that could have been you, or anybody else that you may know. And in 2017, Mapping Police Violence has collected data for all the police killings that has happened in that year. Exactly 1,147 people were killed by the police in 2017. 25% of those were African Americans, although African Americans only make up 13% of this country's population. And only 1% of those, out of all those killings, only 1% of them were convicted in the murdering of all these people. And because of that, people are becoming so angry. Artists like Jay-Z and Beyonce and entertainers such as Colin Kaepernick are speaking out about these situations.
All right, so I just wanted to show a portion of it. I didn't want to, want us to watch the whole thing, but you can definitely view that on your own time. But I just wanted to give that additional context. I think a lot of times when folks have talked about Trayvon Martin or Tamir Rice or Mike Brown or various folks, Sandra Bland, et cetera, right? Folks have talked about them in a very dehumanizing way, right? And so I think it was important for me to include this photo of Trayvon Martin and his father, right, to show that he was a Black male who came from a loving family, and had folks who really did care for him, and oftentimes the context that's shared with Black males is we grew up in fatherless homes and somehow attributed to the streets, and that saying as some type of validity for why we are being murdered by police. But I wanted to reiterate again and talk about the importance of him as a young identified Black male, growing up in this country, ultimately being murdered at the hands of, a white supremacist ideology and thought process that viewed him as less valuable for walking through a neighborhood that George Zimmerman appeared to believe that he didn't belong in. And so I just wanted to give that context. Also, what I wanted to share a little bit, I want to talk about, I shared about the founders of Black Lives Matter movement, but I also want to talk about the history and the connections in which, have happened and movements that have spun out of it and started even before. Black women have a long history of advocating for the entire Black community. And so I wanted to acknowledge the fact that they have continually done this work, oftentimes being at the forefront, even when Black males haven't even decided to step up or speak out about different things. And so oftentimes, again, in the historical context, we consider a lot of our great activists, political activists, to be Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and these are male identified folks. But really, Black women are leading a lot of the initiatives and the efforts to seek out justice and change for us. And I wanted to acknowledge that in this space. So the Me Too movement was started, by Tarana Burke in 2006. Kashana Thompson, in 2013, coined the phrase Black Girl Magic. And then, Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw really was the one who was influential in establishing the phrase and hashtag Say Her Name, right? Which is really built out of this space of, again, not really acknowledging, Black women's presence and their value in the community. A lot of Black women were murdered and also murdered by, police. And oftentimes, again, I want to echo and reiterate, they aren't seen or valued in the same way that the Black males who are murdered by police are oftentimes valued. And again, just a brief example of that, the amount of exposure that was given to George Floyd's situation opposed to Breonna Taylor's situation, right? And so we see that and kind of how that plays out. And I think, when we really have to have these conversations about gender equity, and it's important to put those conversations at the front in everything that we do and everything that we discuss, right? So again with the history of Black women who have been leading the fight, really, when we look at our history, we have women like Sojourner Truth, who was very, very influential in women's right activism, and trying to really work towards changing the ideology and thought process of white men, particularly around the freedom of women and the freedom of Black people, Black identified people. Also here in Chicago, particularly, there's history and context. And excuse me, I'm sorry if anybody is squeamish, but I shared this photo intentionally. But Mamie Till was Emmett Till's mother, and she was very strategic and very intentional about making sure that folks saw her son's body and how white supremacist ideas and ideologies and how they felt about him ultimately and how they murdered him needed to be on display. And she was very strong in the way that she did it, and I commend her for her bravery, but really again trying to put an end to a lot of these thought processes of anti-Blackness, particularly here in America. And then also Angela Davis, she was a part of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, and she was very influential in organizing and creating a lot of change in California, where I'm particularly from. And I think also Alicia Garza, who was also from Oakland, was very influenced by the work that Angela Davis had done. All right, so I just want to also recognize too that the Black Lives Matter movement also has various different sections, and has evolved in various different ways. And so I think it's important to recognize and include all voices, all Black voices, in what we think about and consider to be the Black Lives Matter movement, right? And so we've seen the rise of Black trans lives matter. We've seen the rise of Black disabled lives matter. We've seen the rise of Black inner city lives, particularly dealing with the environmental racism, because folks have, there have been various environmental, situations that have been created with toxic waste in inner city communities with a lack of, access to healthy foods and food deserts that have taken place. And so really looking at the environmental and structural things that take place that also affect Black lives, and also the various matters campaigns, right? Black business matters, Black educators, Black mothers matter. And so we want to think about and name those things as well as a part of the movement. Okay. So when we really think about Black Lives Matter movement, what a lot of folks say and a lot of folks have comments about is particularly, again, just looking at the amount of people who have been killed by police brutality, right? Folks often dispute and debate, right, about if it's really a thing that's happening, occurring. And I wanted to note that there was a longitudinal study that was done, particularly looking at police brutality amongst the different racial groups, and so the breakdown and what we found from that study and that longitudinal study is it researched and looked at cases from 2015 to 2021. And what was found that there was approximately 6,138 Black people murdered by police and counting, right? And so that number is significant when we look at, the amount of Black people that actually exist and are present in the United States. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that and give a little bit more context about that. But one thing that I wanted to note and just put it into context for you all too, and understanding from 2015 to 2021, this is a number 6,138. That's approximately every student that attends NEIU. I'll say that again because I really want you all to understand 6,138, that's approximately the amount of students, every student that attends NEIU. And so when I say that, I really hope it resonates and helps you understand the severity of the situation and why this movement is so powerful and so necessary when we talk about it. All right, and also I wanted to mention, that was what about when racism wasn't legal? That was from 2015 to 2021, right? But existing pre 2015 and where we are now, there was Jim Crow South. There were laws that were put in place that were very anti-Black in their practices, and so there has historically always been police brutality, particularly in this country. I just wanted to acknowledge and give name to the fact that a lot of the folks who were victims of police brutality, weren't able to be captured in that number, right? Just recent in the past, I want to say decade or 20 years or so, we've really been doing longitudinal studies of police brutality and how it has affected the various communities in this country. All right. So what I was saying when I was sharing the last clip, what a lot of people fail to understand and fail to realize when they think about those numbers, and folks will continue to pull from various different studies and various different areas and say, according to the data, per capita, white identified folks are killed at a larger rate than Black identified folks. And what we have to understand is that the way that the country is made up, white identified folks make up 60% of the population. So when we kind of disaggregate the data and kind of look at it, there's a disproportionate amount of Black people being murdered by police because we only represent 13% of the entire population. And so I think that's a point to really, to mention and to further investigate as you all are thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement in particular. Also, in this presentation, I'm not going to go really into depth about particular things. I want to leave a lot of space for you all to investigate on your own. I think there's truly a lot of value in investigating and finding your own, research and ways to this information. And so I'm here to, purely highlight a lot of a lot of the things that are attached to the movement, but also wanted to encourage you all to, again, further investigate these things on your own. Again, a study that was done by Washington Post, and it just came out in March of 2021. It was done from 2015 to 2021, the study was. And we found that disproportionately, again, kind of going with the theme of why the Black Lives Matter movement was started in 2013, with the murder of Trayvon Martin, large amount, the folks who are murdered by police are Black identified males, particularly within a significant age group when we think about, those who are between the ages of 25 and 29 being represented amongst those. So we're not talking about fairly older identified folks. We're talking about young folks who really had the opportunity to, before they even had the opportunity to dream and accomplish things and figure out how they were going to navigate the world. Their lives were taken from them, and that's important too to think about in our context. Of course, in working in higher ed, because again, as we serve our students and we serve the communities that we work in, we think about all of these lives that are lost so young that could have potentially done amazing things for this country, for our communities, etc. All right. So when we also have to talk about the disparity in which police officers are, convicted of these crimes. Right. The Black Lives Matter movement isn't just about advocating and speaking out about police brutality. It's also about making sure that police are held accountable for things that they've done wrong. I think, when we look at the racial makeup of the prison industrial complex, and we look at the racial makeup of folks who have been, who have been incarcerated for cannabis, right? And now cannabis is such a viable industry. We see, the disproportionate disparities that are oftentimes carried out, and so we just want police officers to be held accountable in the same way for the violence in which they create and the harm they create in our communities. And so, the percentage of convictions that have, existed throughout, this time in these years that we've considered a part of the Black Lives Matter movement, only 33% of the police officers have actually been charged with a conviction, right? And then when we look at further, the percentage in which were actually given a prison sentence. But the thing that's most alarming to me is the length of time that they were given for prison and they spent in prison. And so I think that's important when we think about equitable justice. There are a lot of people who have, again, cannabis related charges, have nonviolent charges that are serving, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, or serving life in prison. And so when we think about the disparities and the unjust and unequitable treatment of Black lives, it's important for us to mention this. All right, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to highlight the 7 demands specifically, because people always say, well, what is the Black Lives Matter movement? They have all of this, they're always protesting, and what do they really want? Do they even know what they want? And so that's the argument that I oftentimes hear. And so what I wanted to do is offer these demands. So these are 7 current demands. You can also find these on their website. So demand number 1, to convict Trump from all convict and ban Trump, from all future political office, to expel the members of Congress who attempted to overturn the election and incite white supremacist attacks. So we're talking about the attack that happened, recently at the Capitol. To launch a full investigation of ties between white supremacy and the Capitol Police, law enforcement, and the military. To launch a full investigation the ties between white supremacy and the Capitol Police and the military. That's what I just read. Number 5, to defund the police. And I highlighted that particularly because I want to talk about that and go in depth, because that's the number one thing that people always ask about. Why do we want to defund the police? We'll talk a little bit about that. Don't let the coup be used to excuse the crackdown on the movement, and pass the BREATHE Act. I really hope you all take some time, and if you can, if you don't know about the BREATHE Act, write it down and research it for yourself. There's some really powerful and influential things that could really reimagine the way that we see community, particularly in the BREATHE Act. And it's not particularly just, talking about the chokeholds oftentimes that police officers use against folks. But it's also talking about the ability to actually breathe, right, in our communities, in our everyday lives, right, to have the ability to be able to live a healthy, quality life by offering equitable practices and equitable resources to the folks in Black identified communities. All right, so I wanted to talk about defund the police, right? That's one of the things that's been a super hot topic. And I think particularly for you all who are in social work, it's important and imperative that we talk about this. So the defund police movement really isn't about, completely just eradicating police officers, not in its early inception, right? Gradually, we would like to get to a space where we could, imagine a world or have a world where we don't have to criminalize or victimize people for, the things that are done or not done in our society. But defund the police is about really reallocating and redistributing resources to the appropriate spaces to be able to give people the help that they need and the level of care that they need. And so oftentimes, some of the things that are discussed when we're talking about redistribution of the budget or economics and how it plays out, we're talking about defunding the police and using some of their funding, particularly for social workers, after school programs, and ways to help build up the skills and abilities and invest into the actual people from communities who are disproportionately being victimized. And we're talking about mental health services, right, being offered. I read a particular study, and it was saying somewhere around 90% of the calls that police officers receive are mental health related, right? And so we know and understand that many police departments do not have mental health service training, right? They don't have training, about how to advocate or how to intervene on behalf of folks who are dealing with a mental health issue, and that's really important and imperative that we have somebody who is trained in that capacity to be able to deal with these folks who are being perceived as a threat. And some of these situations could turn out totally different if we had mental health professionals being able to address these folks in the community in a non-violent manner, opposed to someone being sent out fearing, not knowing what the situation is, but possibly fearing the situation and fearing the person who might be wielding a knife or whatever the case may be, and attempting to defend themselves by shooting a person. Also wanted to share about Campaign Zero, which is intended to look at how we can reimagine policing, particularly in this country. In a lot of ways, again, talking about limiting police interventions, police in improving community interaction, and ensuring accountability, right? As you can see, these various things here, I won't talk too much about them, but these are some of the things that we're looking at with the Campaign Zero initiative, and trying to, again, really get people to understand that there are some things that we need to assess, particularly about how we think about the police in this country. For a lot of people, they've mentioned, I feel safe. I feel safe having police around, or I feel safe knowing that police exists, or the police department is able to come when I need them. And I think that's all well and intention, but some other people, you know, have a very different context, right? When you have you've grown up in a community and police have always been present, their squad cars have always circled your community. You've gone to a school that has had metal detectors and police officers present. You know, you go to work and, you know, you you have security officers and police officers there. You kind of have this, you know, hypersensitivity and awareness to police presence, right? And it oftentimes, you know, increases folks' anxiety and you know, doesn't allow them to operate at 100% capacity because they're always on edge about the presence of police. And so I just wanted to mention that as well. Lastly, if we get to this, you know, to a final space where we totally abolish, you know, the police, what that's really talking about and attempting to aim at is defunding the police, demilitarizing communities, removing police from schools, freeing people from prisons and jails. And so people oftentimes say, "What, you want to free people from prisons and jails?" Well, you know, there's a lot of different models, and I think the way that we have been, you know, taught and socialized to think about policing and jailing in this country is very punitive. And there are some models in various other countries that could potentially work. And just you know, I think it's Finland who has a really great way of how they deal with their people who have been convicted of a crime. And so I invite you all to investigate particularly how they operate their prisons and jails in Finland. And so the ultimate goal, again, to repeal laws about criminalizing survival, to invest in communities and give them the sense of autonomy over self-governance, to provide a safe housing for everyone, and then also to invest in care, right? We want to invest in care and make sure that people have everything that it is that they need, and that we also make sure that people have equitably what it is that they need for their various communities. All right. And so what I wanted to mention and take it a little bit further and make it a little bit more personal, when we think about Chicago, there's a $1.7 million budget, or billion, excuse me, $1.7 billion budget in Chicago. And so when we think about Chicago, I'm not from Chicago, I'm from California, but as someone who is from a different state, who has come to this state, I think the perception of Chicago is dangerous, right? And that's what everybody who has seen what the media has portrayed and various things about Chicago, you know, have that understanding or that perception. But again, when we look at a $1.7 billion budget, and it's approximately made up of 40% of all of Chicago's expenses, we think about that and how the police are heavily being funded, and how that money could be redistributed to help some of those, you know, underserved communities, and how that $1.7 billion could go a long way towards changing folks' lives by creating, you know, job opportunities, resources, mental health services, and all of the additional things that folks need to really live a good quality of life. When we look at NEIU specifically, and really wanted to make it plain, when we look at NEIU specifically, the NEIU police have a budget in the 2019-2020 school year of $2 million, right? And student support services combined, we're talking about counseling services, career services, student union, right? SOD, we're talking about everyone, had an approximate budget of $700,000, right? And so when we think about, again, redistributing funds to be able to support those who really need it the most, there are a lot of our students who are struggling to pay tuition. How many of them could afford their tuition if that money was being reallocated, right? If jobs were being created on campus? I think a lot of what the report said about particularly the work that NEIU police are doing on campus, a lot of it is just opening doors, right? And so the committee, our defund the police committee here at NEIU, what we've, you know, really looked at and what we've assessed, you know, what if students were offered those jobs, right? To be able to come open doors for faculty members and staff members. And they wouldn't have to, travel off campus to go to work and then come to campus to, take classes and, all of the stress that's related to that. I know that students have mentioned, having to travel, nearly 2 hours to get here. And so, again, thinking about the quality of life that could be created with the redistribution. All right. And so what I wanted to mention and what I wanted to say, again, when we think about the Black Lives Matter movement, oftentimes people go to the Black Lives Matter movement, particularly because they know of it. The name is very highly publicized and marketed. But I also wanted to give mention to two particular organizations in Chicago that are doing this work very intentionally and specifically for Black lives in the community. And so, when we think about the support and how we can support, I wanted to name these organizations. So Black Lives Matter Chicago, Black Lives Matter LUC, that's Loyola University Chicago, BYP, the Black Youth Project 100. They also do great work. They're actually where I got my my Black queer feminist lens from, and helping out and learning a lot about their organization and the work that they do. The Asada Daughters, initiative. They do great work with our young women here in Chicago, young Black identified women here in Chicago. And so there's various avenues and ways that you can get involved at the local level. And so I think when folks, again, when they think about the Black Lives Matter movement, oftentimes they think about it on a macro scale, but what things could be done intentionally, and how you can get involved right here in Chicago. And so I just wanted to provide those resources. In addition to that, ways that you can get involved. So challenge anti-Blackness or anti-Black racism in your own racial group, right? When you're having conversations with folks and, they make comments or, have various ideologies, challenge those ideologies. Don't let them go unchallenged, because by you just, challenging those ideologies and continuing to challenge in those ideologies, folks will start to ask questions. They'll start to rethink the way that they engage in conversation. And ultimately, that's kind of how we start the process of creating change. Again, I advocate for folks to do their own and independent research. One of the things that Dr. Bettina Love, when she came here to campus in February, she mentioned she mentioned that it's really important for non-Black folks to not expect Black people to teach, because we haven't really been given a space to heal, right? And so if we're constantly in the fight teaching anti-racist work and teaching in various spaces and have to be the folks who are educating, we are denying ourselves the ability to heal when we're focusing on actually educating you all. And so again, finding those additional resources for yourself and just doing the work independently is important. Working to dismantle white supremacy, right? We all have to work to dismantle the concept of whiteness or the ideology of whiteness and white supremacy in the work that we do every day. And again, I can't say it enough, but don't brush off anti-Blackness because that's just the way that somebody are. Assuming that your mom or your uncle or your grandpa or whoever is just the way they are because they're old or whatever, you assume, leaving it unchallenged and unchecked just because of you thinking that that's the way they are is not the way to go. Lastly, I wanted to mention the Black Lives Matter Loyola University Chicago. They have a conference that's coming up, and so this is a way for you to be engaged at a communal level. So the conference is a 2-day conference, and I had the opportunity when I was a student at Loyola to really engage, and I was on the committee that ultimately founded this conference, and so it's really an intentional way for students and faculty members to be engaged in thinking about how we can support and further the Black Lives Matter movement in our personal work and in our daily work. And so there are a lot of workshops, particularly focused around this year's theme, which is about health, activism, and healing, right? And so I think it's going to be super powerful, super imperative for you all to attempt to participate if you can. But I wanted to, again, share some additional resources with you. All right. And also, I reached the end, of the presentation. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I gave you some additional context about the movement. But feel free to ask me questions. I'll answer any question that you may have to the best of my ability. But I really wanted to make sure that we spent time in building community and sharing our thoughts and this process with each other. So thank you for having me. And yeah, we'll open it up for questions. I'll also take the presentation down just so we can maybe see a little bit of each other as well.
Please feel free to unmute yourself, and if you have any thoughts or questions that you would like to share at this point, this would be great.
Hello, everybody. My name is LaConda Smith. My pronouns are she, hers, and hers. And I was invited by a classmate of mine. She kind of jumped off. However, I think I did receive emails about this, but I didn't really notice the email until my classmate sent it to me. However, I thought that this was very informative. I liked how Mr. Mays highlighted that the amount of money that the police are getting and how those funds could be allocated, reallocated, to different resources and different aspects to help instead of like I like the idea that he was saying like students could have those jobs at the school, opening the doors, and so because I was one of the students who was traveling 2 hours back and to get to school, and then I would have to go to work or go to work and then come to school. And so to have it like a job at the school where you can get paid instead of like just giving all of those funds to the police. Not saying that we don't have crime on campus, but since I've been there, there's been some crime, but not like $1 billion worth of, crime. But I like the way that the presentation was presented. It was very informative. And I'll be joining, I think the Loyola one. I'm going to try to attend that event. And so thanks, Mr. Mays.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. And what I wanted to mention also, what we found on the Defund the Police committee, NEIU committee, what we found, NEIU is named amongst the most safe campuses, one of the most safe campuses in all of Illinois, excuse me. And so, again, when we think about that, when we think about the amount of crime that has happened on campus, all of those instances have been majority of the instances have been theft related and not violent crimes. And so I wanted to mention that and reiterate that because again, folks oftentimes advocate, well, what would happen if, we had an active shooter on campus or, we need to, and we're totally not saying, completely defund campus police because, we do understand their value. But when you have some 20 folks on staff, and we're considered to be one of the safest campuses in all of Illinois, that begs a question, to investigate. So thank you for mentioning that.
I'm a transfer student and I haven't had the opportunity to visit any campus. And I was just wondering where would I find the Black Student Success Committee? I'll be joining hopefully in the fall, the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies. And I just would like to know how would I be a part of that organization or get information?
Yeah, great. I put my email in the chat so you can contact me. We meet every first and third Thursday of the month at 2 to 3:30. But it's always a great way for you to stay connected to the committee and the work that we're doing. Really, we kind of changed our focus and shifted our focus to building out Project Success and rebuilding Project Success, which is a program that has historically been for Black identified students and supporting them through their years of college here at NEIU, excuse me. But yeah, I put my information in the chat, and you can contact me, and I'll add you to the email list, particularly for the Black Student Success Committee. We also do various initiatives and efforts supporting Black identified students, particularly in just ended in February, but we did the Black Professional Membership Initiative fee initiative that basically we took care of students' fees for joining a professional organization, because we understand that it's one thing to come to school, but it's also another thing to be connected to a network of folks in your chosen field of study who can identify with your experiences and help you ultimately get that career that you want to achieve. So if you want to take advantage of that, I'll put my email in the chat, and I think we still have some resources left over for you to be able to take advantage of that initiative.
And I've been.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, and welcome to NEIU also.
Definitely. I've been sharing a few of the links of the things that you've mentioned. So definitely keep an eye on that chat and open them or copy them so that you can go back to them after the presentation as well. Any other thoughts or questions from folks? I wanted to mention, Timothy, that I really appreciated the way that you tied in this piece of the social workers, right? Because I think that sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit or merit in the ways that we can impact change, truthfully impact change, right? I think for a long time as a field, we have unfortunately been given a bad rep, and so many times you may come to some organizers and activists out doing some amazing work, and you might find a little hesitation to work with social workers, right? But I think that we're at a critical moment, almost a crossroads here, that we can truly define ourselves as what we are. We do follow this framework of social justice, and so we really need to step it up and infuse that in everything that we do, not only within our classrooms, right? And write some wonderful essays and reports about it. We really have to get that foot in the ground and get it mobilizing. So being able to get more familiar with what's out there and how we can fill a role in some way, continue to build those relationships, right? Because we know about rapport building, we know about creating relationships. So if you come across any folks that feel like, well, no, you're part of the problem because you're representing institutions, keep talking to those folks and let them know what you're really about and what your genuine interest is in providing what you want to come and do, right? So I just wanted to add that because I think many times we can get pitted against each other, and I really feel that we can serve as a bridge, right? We can definitely be and continue to show up for a lot of the social change that is happening right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to again, I just wanted to thank you all for inviting me into the space and being here with you all. Again, much like Dr. Rocha said, it's a continuation of the work that we do, right? If we consider ourselves to be a part of the community, we have to bring our personal morals and values to the work that we do. And I think, spaces are becoming more accepting, I want to say accepting of that, bringing our full authentic selves to the space, and really being able to advocate on behalf of our communities and understanding that we don't just take that hat off in the name of professionalism, but it's a part of who we are, the communities and cultures that we come from. And so I just wanted to echo that. We had a question. Where do Okay. And I'm sorry. So the question was, where do you want my efforts at NEIU that doesn't take away or doesn't take away from the lens or off the lens of Black people? I think that's a really valuable question, an important question. I think oftentimes solidarity work. So what I'll say is people like to use this word ally. I'm an ally, right? And and it's a very popular buzzword. And one of the words that is being used to kind of challenge ally is accomplice, right? And so we talk about wanting folks to be accomplices because when you're accomplice, you are also held responsible for the actions that you are conducting or a part of. And I think it's really important, if you identify as someone who can position yourself as an accomplice, for you to be present for the work. I know there's oftentimes, uh, respectability politics around whether you should speak in a space and whether you should be present or even be there. But I think you showing up and standing in solidarity and hearing the concerns and being open to hearing the concerns of other students is important, and is an important way for you to show solidarity. And I'll just, I'll be very frank. Again, coming from California, my perspective is a little different. And one of the things that I've noticed particularly about NEIU is that amongst the racial groups, racial identity groups, is very siloed, and the experiences are very like segregated. And I think that is a proponent of the way that the communities are made up in Chicago, because they're very concentrated by racial group. And so when folks come to NEIU, they just carry out that same kind of process because that's how they grew up, right? And so we don't really cross the boundary or cultural or racial boundaries in terms of in intentionally going into spaces and communing with folks. And I think that's really one of the ways that we tear down our barriers, our assumptions, our misconceptions of groups, by sharing community when they offer to let us into those spaces. And so tonight we actually have a program in the Pedroso Center that's called Black and Latinx Solidarity. And we're attempting to reimagine NEIU's campus, thinking about how can Black student organizations and Latinx identified student organizations work together in our approaches. Because again, all of the issues that we're faced with and fighting against and fighting for ultimately are combating the same thing, which is white supremacist structures that exist that create barriers for people. And we have to be very intentional in naming that and saying that. But your presence, particularly as a white identified student, is very important, because it lets other students at NEIU know that you are intentionally and you care about the intentionality of building community and hearing what students have to say.
I hope that was helpful, Emma. I wanted to share, I know we're coming up to the time already, but Timothy had mentioned about some of the ways that funding, once there is a more serious conversation about defunding police, some of the ways that services can be allocated. And so there was a mention about mental health services. I wanted to share another link in the chat, and that's for the Collaborative Community for Wellness. It's a coalition. Currently, the head is really coming out of the Bretton Park Neighborhood Council, but they've been working on a campaign called Treatment Not Trauma, right? That is very much a local campaign about that reallocation and finding ways to make it a viable option for folks with particularly with social work degrees, but obviously with any mental health sector degrees, to be able to provide some support and not feed into this co-responder model, which is what the Chicago Police Department and the city want, which would be aligning social workers with police officers. That's a no, right? In our principles and values, it would be, as Timothy mentioned, just like here in the Northeastern campus, many of the calls may not even be there would not be a need for someone with a firearm to show up, right? Many times that actually escalates situations versus de-escalating. And so the intention of the campaign is to create another arm of first responders that would include a mental health professional and an EMT. So someone that can focus on the mental health piece and someone that can focus on the physical well-being of the person. If someone were to come, with a call about someone having some kind of psychosis situation, right? Versus having, someone like an armed official show up and potentially creating more trauma for that individual. So that's just a little example of some of the things that they're doing, but I wanted to share that link because they provide some of the reports that they've done on the stats regarding all of this piece of mental health within particularly the south and southwest sides of the city. So we'll take a look at that. At this point, I'd like to invite Natividad to join us in sharing a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim, so much for being able to obviously talk about the Black Lives Matter movement and the activism, as well as bringing the social work component. Like Dr. Rocha mentioned, my name is Natividad. I am a senior majoring in social work. And then I'm also the current president for the Alliance of Student Social Workers, ASSW. I just wanted to talk a little bit about ASSW for those who may not know what it stands for. So it's a student-led organization at NEIU. Its basic function is to collaborate with the social work department. It provides like student engagement, the opportunity to engage in active advocacy and lobbying within the university and beyond. It also serves a place to socialize and connect with peers and then create a lifelong community of allies and partners. I know on Facebook we have a Alliance for Student Social Workers. There's always a lot of students and past students at NEIU who have been posting about job opportunities, internship opportunities, events that are there for student social workers or even student social worker professionals. I would like to invite you all for that, and as well as leaving my contact information if anybody wants to be more involved, even if you're a junior. Obviously, because I will be graduating this May, we want to do that transition from our current board to the next one. That way they have like this organization keeps going on for future decades to come. So I'll leave my email. I'm really good at emailing people back. Just when my mental health is okay. So obviously just want to thank everybody for coming out. I also want to give the moment for my fellow classmates who are in ASSW to present themselves, because we work so hard to bring Tim in here. But before I do, I'm going to give it one more time for Tim for honestly being really vocal about this. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about, and understand that there's other classmates of mine that are really passionate about it. So I'm gonna pass it out to Nada.
Hey y'all, my name's Nada. I am kind of a senior. I graduate in December. I am currently completing my internship at an organization that focuses a lot on restorative justice. So defunding the police is something that we talk about regularly. And also moving towards restorative justice practices in other areas such as schools. One of the projects that I'm working on right now is removing CPD out of CPS. So like school resource officers out of Chicago public schools. So thank you, Tim, for like continuing to highlight this work that's so important. And as social workers, like it's our responsibility to advocate for those marginalized communities. And this just, like all the data that you were showing just highlights how much more work is left to be done. to support this community in the work that we do. And I will pass it over to Mariah.
Thanks, Nita. Hi, everyone. My name is Mariah. I am the secretary for ASSW. I'm very grateful to be here. I am also a senior, but I'm not graduating until December because of credit requirements and all of that. But so one last semester of electives, and then I get to finish out my time at NEIU. But I am currently interning at a domestic violence agency called Sarah's Inn in the west side of Chicago. And I work with the prevention team. So we go into middle schools and high schools in the west side of Chicago and the west suburbs, Oak Park, River Forest area, including areas like Berwyn, Cicero, all of those schools. And we teach middle schoolers and high schoolers how to have healthy relationships and prevent violence from happening in the future. And so I believe that that also translates into this work of Black Lives Matter and learning how the environment influences the students and the individuals themselves, and then how this work can break down those kind of gender roles, and seeing the students just as who they are, and helping them to cultivate healthier relationships with themselves and their friends and families and all of that. So yes, like I said, very grateful to be here. Very important work. Always happy to learn. But yeah, thank you so much.
We also had Destiny Bryan. She's no longer with us right now, but she is our current treasurer for ASSW. Just wanted to put that out there. If you have her on any of your classes, you could reach out to her to be more involved or be active with the ASSW group. But that's it for our component. Once again, Tim, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk about this important topic in society. I don't know if Dr. Rocha or Tim want to say anything before we complete, or Professor Cledgett.
Hi, I'm Crystal Cleggett. I'm the interim BSW director for the field of education, as well as the advisor for the BSW ASSW organization. Timothy, thank you so much for working with us. I want to say to our students, thank you all so much for doing this. This is a little bit different than what we typically have done for Social Work Month. So please continue to pass this legacy on and partner with other organizations of the university. And you all talked about collaborating and being engaged, whether it's with our Black identified students, our Latinx identified students, the way that we can be amongst each other is to submerge with each other, right? To communicate. And so not just on platforms like this, but in general. So Timothy, thank you again. And I definitely look forward to partnering with you again in the near future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I just wanted to say thank you for having me in the space with you all. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention, we're wrapping up in the Pedroso Center, we're wrapping up Woman's Her Story Month, and we've got a lot of events. And so please check out our events on our Pedroso page. But in addition to that, next month is APITA Heritage Month. And so for folks who don't know what APITA is, that's Asian Pacific Islander and Desi American Heritage Month. And so again, in lieu of the violence and hate crimes that have been perpetrated against our Asian identified brothers and sisters, we have a lot of programming that is going to be particularly done. And I want to encourage you all to come out and participate in building community with us for APITA Heritage Month as well. So thank you again for having me.
Thanks so much, Timothy. And I wanted to give a shout out to the chair of social work that joined us for this session, Dr. Joe Benway.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, team. We can't thank you enough for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. That was great. And I'm also like to thank my students, Nativda, and all four of them were with me this morning by 8:30. The students that try to keep me awake in the morning, and they are doing a great job. Thank you so much, students. And thank you, everybody, for giving us the time. And thank you, Dr. Rocha and Crystal. And you, Sheldon, and the rest of the staff, thank you for making this happen.
Thanks, Dr. Enway. Thanks everyone for your time. We really appreciate you all. Have a great rest of the week. Continue to join us for the remainder of Social Work Month sessions that we have. We have another one tomorrow, and then we have about 2 or 3 more events coming up next week. So make sure you link up. Take care, everybody. Be safe out there.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Timothy. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.